you don't want me to do that. There we go. Okay. So we're gonna talk about some of the cost estimates. Then we're gonna break out and we're gonna talk about challenges, costs, and timing, and some other things, and get more in depth into some of the things we touched on this morning. We're gonna come back and briefly report back and talk about the next steps. So here's what we would like to have happen today, what we'd like you to get out of it. Our desired outcomes are to update you and get feedback on the economic development recommendations, the zero waste plan structure, the options, the costs, and the obstacles. We want to update you on the different things that we're doing about outreach as well and get your thoughts on that. So that's what we're going to be covering. So since the last meeting, you all provided some great input. We sent out sort of a summary of the notes, and we got some feedback from you afterwards. So we considered and integrated that. We refined the options. So we had 19 options last time. We still have 19 options that we're recommending, or we're hoping that you recommend, and we refined those a bit. We started the outreach study case studies. We don't have anything to present to you this time, but we will have those soon. We've drafted economic development plan recommendations. We have the outline of the plan itself, and we drafted the impact analysis, which is part of the materials you got, and which I believe are at the table. So, any questions so far, comments, thoughts, before we move on with the agenda? Okay, we're going to move on with the agenda. So, on the community engagement, Susan, do you want to do this? Do you want me to? We're live streaming.
So since the last meeting, we have been visiting all the neighborhoods via the Mayor's Coffee Hour that has been going on all summer. David from Green Bay has been talking about various things that are part of our climate action plan, as well as our zero waste planning process. I have been working with the mayor's liaisons, which I've been very impressed by. I think there are about over 100 committees, 100 neighborhood associations throughout the city that meet on a monthly basis. So it warms my heart how invested residents are in the neighborhoods. But at any rate, so I have gone in this past, since the last meeting, to actually 10 neighborhood meetings. I've got 5 more planned. And I would say, generally speaking, I haven't gotten a lot of pushback. I think that people are generally, they all say that they recycle. Usually food waste and the plastic bags come up as issues. And I think the understanding, people are interested in doing more. I don't think people have a great grasp what that will mean to them and their families exactly. So, and we don't have exactly the structure that that's going to take. I've talked about what is being done in other cities as well to give a better idea, but there will definitely need to be greater education.
You might add that some of the business groups do.
Oh yeah, okay, yes. So we have been to the medical community. I've been to Beth Israel, and we've been working with ABC. Eve's done a great job with her membership. She's had 2 events that we've participated in, and then we have another one coming up in September. And the survey is still in the works. This is where folks will have an opportunity to, they can go now to the website to get all the information, and if they're interested in doing, getting involved, as I was there, but our actual survey is still in the works. It hasn't been posted yet, where people can also put in their opinions on what they think should be better for the plan.
And just as another reminder, I mean, we talked about this before, all the material that's being presented at these meetings is being posted on our Zero Waste webpage. So it's accessible to everyone who wants to look at it and comment on it.
It's a great webpage. I do encourage everybody to look at it. The live stream of the meetings, the recordings are on there, all the handouts, everything, and everything you want to know about Zero Waste in Boston. So that's great. And I'll just add that as we've been getting comments from Susan from the various meetings, that's all being put into a document that we are taking into account as we draft the plan, and we'll have responses to that as well. Are any?
So what is the website again?
It's Boston Zero Waste.
Yeah, City of Boston,
Right, everybody, it's cityofboston.gov/zero waste. Okay, great. Okay, so part of what we proposed to the city in our proposal to them originally was if we would do write a little something about how the city can take advantage of the materials that it generates to foster economic development, so to create jobs, to create new businesses, to create markets that are local. And we're focusing this really, the economic development part, on what we call the demand side or the end side. So repair, reuse, remanufacture, compost, and recycling. And I know people get a little confused about remanufacture and what that means. So remanufacture is really a form of refurbishing. Recycling is actually when you manufacture materials into a new product. So that's what the whole purpose of putting things in our bin is so that they can be recycled and turned into new products. The strategies that we're looking at are geared towards supporting, retaining, and creating all different kinds of jobs and businesses that use a variety of materials. So and I'll just add this to the jobs that we're looking at. It's sort of hard to define all this because it's not just about economic development locally, but it's about supporting markets for your materials. So some of these jobs might not be right in the city or the region, but it's still making sure that we have markets. So it's market development and economic development at the same time. So why are we focusing on the inside? So material, we can't recycle without the markets. We can't reuse without the markets. We can't divert materials without the markets, without people who repair, without people who remanufacture, without turning the organics into compost. So we need the markets, and usually, as Gary always says, the markets first. And when I was sort of growing up in this field, we were setting up some of the early recycling systems, and we always did that with the markets in mind. So it's really the most important thing to be thinking about. Most of the plan so far is already geared towards things that we can do about reduction and collection. And many of the things that we're recommending can actually, strategies that we're recommending for economic development can be used in collection and processing as well. They're not necessarily unique to market development. So some of the benefits. We can create local jobs. As I said, not all of them are going to be local, but we can create some local jobs. Having markets that are local can help shield the city from some of the ups and downs of international commodities markets. We're looking to create high-value materials, and high-value materials are more resilient when markets go up and down as well. Some of them, the very clean materials are still finding markets, and as we know, the lower quality materials have the hard time. So whenever markets drop down, it's always the high-quality materials that have a place to go, or that will lose their markets last, I guess, too. Reduces the greenhouse gas implications of transportation long distances if we keep things local, bring in tax revenue, and it can raise awareness about zero waste to the local community. So some of the challenges, a lot of these materials do trade on international commodities markets, so making sure that we can keep those away is a challenge. Lack of adequate supplier demand is usually a reason why businesses don't want to, adequate supply is often businesses don't want to utilize secondary materials, and lack of demand for their product. So we need to create a clean supply, and we need to create the demand. Land and buildings is expensive, as we did some of our interviews early on in this process with some of the businesses that work in Boston Zero Waste. This was an issue that came up, and it's an issue everywhere, not just in recycling businesses. And then loss of commercial and industrial zoning. We need to make sure that we retain some zoning for these kinds of businesses. So going back to a chart that you saw at the last meeting or the meeting before, we're looking at what are the kinds of materials that are really ripe for local market development. And organics to rescue and composting between residential and commercial is 30 to 34% of the waste stream. Construction demolition debris, 17%. Glass, 1 to 3%. Reusables, we don't have a number for, but I think Gary said the national average is about 4%. So this is a good chunk of materials that they can do something about. And there are other materials as well, but these are ones that are particularly attractive. So some of the strategies that we're recommending, and we've got a lot of them, and a lot of these are typical economic development strategies, and some of them are a little different, but we did, Mary, who you'll see over there, Mary did a lot of work to develop a list of all the zero waste businesses in Boston. So whether it's used bookstores, whether it's shoe repair, whether it's bicycle repair, things like that. Those are all important parts of zero waste. So we've given that list to the city. We're tweaking it a little more, but we're giving that list to the city, and now we know who these people are, and it's important to try to create a cohort where we can bring all these people together and understand their challenges, what they need, how we can help them create this identity as a zero waste business, and help them grow or help them stay in business. Educate the public about local zero waste service providers through an app or a website. I know Susan's trying to turn this list that we gave them into a map, so that will hopefully be an interactive map people can use. Create mechanisms to help businesses acquire new land or buildings. As I said, these businesses, some of them, they could probably do more if they have more space, and so there are things that the city can do to help them. Develop the workforce. I did a study a number of years ago looking at the workforce development, the workforce needs of the recycling industry in the state, and what we heard from our interviews here echoed some of that information. So businesses are having a hard time finding general labor, finding truck drivers, finding people with technical skills, finding people with good work ethic, and finding people with required licenses. Certain industries need certain licensing. So those are some of the things that the city can help with. And I know in this study that I did a number of years ago, the workforce development community was really looking at how can we reach out to the recycling industry. And it's a challenge. The recycling industry doesn't always want to be reached out to. And but every business in the state pays into a workforce development fund, and a lot of these businesses didn't even know that they then had access to services. So there's probably a role that the city can play in linking those two entities together. Again, the zoning issue, ensure that we've got zoning that can support some of these industries. There's ways that Boston can use its recycling processing contract to support markets. So it could perhaps give financial incentive to its processor for creating cleaner materials. What I did when I was working in San Francisco, we put a clause in the contract that said that the city reserves the right to redirect materials from the MRF for the purposes of market development. Can do that too. If the city can tell a business, look, we can guarantee you a certain amount of materials that might help a business come here. So those are some of the tools that they can use. Develop a zero waste business attraction strategy, just like any other business attraction strategy. So what are the kinds of materials? What quality can we get them to you in? What kind of a workforce do we have? How can we help you site a facility? So those will be some of the parts of it. And then how do we reach out to those businesses? Identify local manufacturers that can utilize secondary materials, secondary feedstock. I don't know who the manufacturers are in Boston or the region right now, but I worked in a previous job that helped manufacturers switch from virgin materials to secondary materials, so maybe there's some things that the city can do with that. Sponsoring demonstration projects. A lot of times businesses have a product, they need a third party to say it works, so maybe there's some demonstration projects that we can do on City Hall Plaza or somewhere in the parks. There could be grants for recycling market development as well, so how do we ideas. Business accelerators, we got a lot of them around Boston. Can we get them to focus a little bit on zero waste types of businesses? We can use the city's purchasing power to buy more recycled products and especially try to look at what are the kinds of things made locally. Materials exchange, this would be another way of keeping materials out of the, even out of the recycling stream. So are there ways, I mean, we've got free cycle, we've got lots of things for residents. Is there more that we can have for businesses where they can exchange some of the materials that they have? Encourage measures to improve the safety, health, and jobs of workers. That's part of the zero waste guiding principles that the city adopted. Work regionally. Obviously, Boston isn't going to necessarily have the land or the volume of materials to attract a business, but doesn't mean we can't work with other cities in the region who are all facing similar kinds of challenges to develop some of these businesses. And there should be a key staff person in the city's Office of Economic Development who's responsible for implementing all of this, whether it's part of an existing job or however that's handled. So those are some of the strategies. We've identified some kinds of in Boston, or I should say Massachusetts, not necessarily Boston, but one takes cartons and turns them into building products. There's another that actually is a paper company. It's paper mill. They have small paper mills, and they're trying to cycle out the country. There's glass and organics as well. So there's some people we have some preliminary conversations with. The city would need to talk more to them, but we think that there's interest. And I will say that what's going on in China right now, where the market's kind of all in upheaval, provides tremendous opportunity for us to step in and create something more local here and more resilient. So, questions, thoughts, comments? Alex? Can you say who you're with?
Sure, Alex Rapalli with Clean Water Action.
And use the microphone.
Morning, Alex Rapalli with Clean Water Action and the Zero Waste Boston Coalition. On one of the previous slides about the focus on economic development on the demand side, you noticed you mentioned remanufacturing without manufacturing. Did you cover that? Did you mention?
I did. So, here,
Say that again, please.
yes.
Thanks.
So I said recycling, and manufacturing with secondary materials is recycling. So, yep, it's in there.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Cross from JPNC. This is an amazing list of things to add to what's already going on in the city. Are you also looking at stemming the tide of negative pressures on capacity? For instance, what's going on with metal scrap capacity in Boston, land prices going up and scrap yards and places on the harbor that are disappearing or being threatened?
I would think that would fall under our recommendations about zoning, that we need to really make sure that we're doing what we can to keep some of these businesses here. And as I said, the price of land is going up. I don't know what the city can do, but I think we're recommending that they look at it. Other thoughts, comments, questions?
Massachusetts. I noticed on the list of products that you were missing plastics. I would appreciate the conversation you have about these vendors and tapping any of the plastics, styrofoam.
That's a good question. So we have not talked to any plastics companies. I don't know of any necessarily interested here. So in my last job, I worked it was a statewide recycling market development center, and we worked with a lot of plastics industry. And I checked, there still is some plastics industry in the state that is taking recycled plastics. Whether I don't know where they're getting it from, plastics you should go to a broker. But we don't know of any other plastics companies looking to develop new locations. There's some Chinese plastic companies that are looking to come to the United States. I'm not sure if they're brokers or manufacturers, But that would be something to look at. It's just that there was nothing obvious to us about it. And that could also fit under the grants. Put out a grant saying we're looking for companies that will do something with plastics, or it could be part of the overall economic development attraction strategy. We're looking specifically for plastics companies. Okay.
With the China situation, there's actually two major issues, mixed paper and mixed plastics. So I'm really glad you brought up the plastics. Amy's list was of those who we know who have currently been contacting the area that might be interested. But for the city to come up with its own list of what we're interested in making sure there's neat opportunities for would be corollary to that. So that's great input to provide. I'm interpreting your question. And on the mixed plastic side, one of the things we found in our site visits to facilities is most of the plastics are being used domestically. We in the Boston area haven't been as impacted by the mixed plastic problems in China as others have been. That's really good news. Whether they can continue to do that, there's going to be increased demand for this remains to be seen.
One very small demand side initiative that I just want to flag for folks. The Public Works Department, in addition to thinking about how we handle residential recycling and trash, we are also thinking a lot about sidewalks. And some of that means full reconstruction of sidewalks, some of that also means just fixing cracks in sidewalks. One of the things that we looked at last week, and we are doing today in the South End, is a fix to sidewalks that actually is a glass-based solution for cracks. And actually, the initial sort of feedback from the team was very positive last week, so we're taking more of that. Doing things like that, I think there are ways we can sort of make a market for the city from stuff that's coming from us.
Anything else? Yes.
Really, no, I was just reading yesterday about and there's an LA Times article about the fluctuation of markets and all that, and there was a bill in the legislature there about requiring a minimum percent of plastic bottles, I think, to use recycled material in their production. And I'm wondering if there's any sort of either legislative or other sort of government solutions to this, requiring use of recycled.
Yes, I've been purchasing. And so when you do your purchasing, you say we need a minimum of X% of recycled content. And we'll say that Massachusetts is a national leader in environmentally preferable purchasing, as it's called. And the city also has an executive order on purchasing. But what the city can do as well is tap into the contracts and the contract language that the state has. And that could perhaps take it even farther. So I would say, so minimum content, and you can do points for higher content. But you need to make sure that those products are available. But there's a lot of work done on that front, and Julia Wolf in the state does an incredible job on this. No, she's with the, what's it called? The state. Oh, I see. Thank you. Operational Services Division.
And minimum content legislation.
Yeah. Yeah, I can do this. Is there national legislation? There's nothing now. The Northeast Recycling Council worked on minimum content legislation for newspapers. I think it's harder and harder to even get a newspaper now with that content, but you can pass legislation. The city can advocate for legislation statewide for minimum content, minimum recycled content.
And minimum content for plastics is the key thing that's needed as far as the legislative issue. That's why it's needed in California.
A lot of the, or at least a few of the big service providers, haulers, processors, et cetera, have divisions that do a lot of this stuff for their commercial clients, market development, materials exchanges, utilizing contracts that are generally called resource management, that they did tell us a while ago. So those stakeholders didn't really show up so much on the list, but it could be a resource to tap in, do some contract innovation, see if they can provide services for the whole city and kind of make their money based on the services they provide.
Okay, so we're going to look at the where we are on the zero waste plan elements. First, I wanted to ask a question about anyone not get the handout that was passed around at the beginning of the meeting. Anyone not get it? Do we have any more copies? Could someone grab the copies and bring them to the people with their hands raised? You keep your hands raised if you'd like to get a copy. Okay. Are there any more? Great. Okay. Is there anyone who has not heard about the China market situation that Amy went over briefly? Has anyone not heard about China? Okay, great. The newspapers are. Pardon?
Yeah, they were.
Okay, so on China, the reason I'm asking about that is it's a key part of the market development piece. It's a really important part of what could be uniquely Boston's contribution to the national leadership on zero waste. Zero waste and economic development correspond to this crisis that is probably the biggest crisis in the markets that we've had in decades in the U.S. China basically has said we're going to be stopping all imports of recyclables by 2020. All imports, about 30% of all recyclables in America go to China. So by 2020, not too far now, we need to find other homes. There's other countries that are taking it, like Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, India, but they're having problems because they haven't built up the port capacities and the handling capacities to handle that much material overnight. China's been working on developing a circular economy since 2000, and that circular economy is coming into play so that they don't need our resources anymore because it's going in a cycle within their own economy. That's what our zero waste plan's about. We need to develop that circular economy and catch up to where they started 20 years ago. So that's why market development and economic development is so important. In the 1990s, it was a major effort that many communities and states were undertaking around the country to address that issue. But the China situation, when China and India started new modern paper mills with low-cost labor, they sucked all the materials out of America and Europe. Overnight, the prices rose. We got unhappy with all the market prices and grew to rely on high market prices to support our programs. With China saying, I'm not going to take your garbage anymore, which is the first phase, and then by 2020, I'm not going to take your recyclables anymore. We're in a unique position. In the next year or two, we need to make major changes to focus our efforts on domestic markets. And domestic means North America, so Canada, Mexico are major users of material. So the relationships that we have, our country with them, is really important. And with regard to local economic development, our analysis shows under 1,000 jobs, about 40% of them being developed locally and about 60% domestically if we embrace the zero-waste economic development direction. So I just want to underscore that the China situation, or the China syndrome, for those of you who saw that movie, is real and a major factor. We're the first major city in America that is developing a zero-waste plan in the context of market crisis. So we have the opportunity to be a national leader by embracing it and saying we want to be in the lead and use those resources locally to create the jobs and create the materials, zero-waste circular economy like China has developed. China's showing us it can be done. We need to take the lead and show it can be done in America too. So, in the zero-waste plan, we've developed an outline of what the plan will look like. We've gotten a couple of model plans from this city, and in those had a couple of the provisions like the letter of transmittal, advisory committee listing, acknowledgements, table of contents. Then we go into the guts of it, which is an overview, the process, the guiding principles, evaluation criteria. We'll be looking at the existing system, what data we have, the programs, the opportunities we found from looking at the existing system. And then come in the plan will be the initiatives. We've been calling them options up until now and through today, but the options before you will become the initiatives, the services, rules, outreach, and education initiatives that will constitute the bulk of the solutions of the zero waste plan to the problems identified in the existing system. We'll then have an impact analysis looking at the costs, benefits, staffing, costs related to those different options and initiatives. We'll be looking at the job creation potential, which I mentioned, the initial level that we've been calculating, and the amount of reduction of greenhouse gases. Then we'll have an implementation timeline, goals and milestones. We'll be looking at funding, data and reporting, the message Dennis shared at the last meeting. We have a separate section just on the importance of data and reporting and specific contract provisions to address that in draft form for the zero waste plan, and the timeline with the short term, medium term, and long term being what we've been talking about generally through this process. Finally, we'll have two appendices at this point. The first will be a full description of the initiatives. What you got the last time, that was a full description of the options, has been added to with the input that we got from the Zero Waste Advisory Committee and the public through the neighborhood and community meetings. We've been tracking all the comments that Susan's been gathering, sending to us, and then collating the spreadsheet that you mentioned. And so we check off each one and make sure that we've seen where we've addressed it in the plan, and all those will be addressed. And we're trying to deal with the issue of how big a plan can it be. If it's 100 pages like we've done in other communities, not a lot of people are going to read it. So we're going to start with a summary document, 2 or 3 pages, that will be able to be standalone on its own. The bulk of the document will be on the order of 30 pages, is what we're seeing at this point. And then the appendices will be much more detailed. They could be attached to or separate. The current list of the full initiative descriptions is 30 pages long and has, again, all the things that we've talked about at the last meeting as options, and including the input that we've received to date. And there will be the economic and market development recommendations as an additional appendix, which Amy just went over. So that's the flow of the document that we had planned. A lot of it's been written in draft form in different stages, and we'll be presenting that to you hopefully soon. The next thing to highlight is the key themes in the recommended options are the 3 clean streams. Clean is a key word, tests really well with the public.
I just thought that might be a good moment just to pause and about the structure of the document.
And any comments, questions about the structure of the document? Insights? Okay.
Sorry, one other note on that. If you were all thinking about what are the things you would want to share with your stakeholders, your community group, your business association, the institution that you represent, does this structure include those things? That's essentially, it would be great to have a document, to Garrett's point, that is not 100 pages and then not read, but instead action timed and written around a document that's useful for all of you to be able to share with all institutions.
And an example of that is how much do we need to explain the China situation and the problems that we're facing versus how much should we just jump into what the initiatives are. So giving us some feedback on that issue either today or in the subcommittee meetings that follow this full meeting or subsequently. Getting the right balance on this. We want it to be readable. We're going to have an editor, a designer look, review our technical.
You have a designer to critify it.
Right. So look at your other model plans.
To Chris's point, I think something in the overview, or maybe a subsequent to the overview, a one-pager that identifies actions. So what can I do as an organization, or what do I need to do as an organization? What are my responsibilities? That's the kind of thing I think would really help here. And not only organizations, but individuals, of course.
Great. Great suggestion. Steve?
I was wondering kind of on some of the lines, like, you know, kind of key takeaways, you know, if you're a business, what's changing, what do I need to know, what do I need to do if I'm a resident, small business, like just a one page so that they know the rules, the policy, you know, that kind of thing, I think would be great.
Right.
Because the one page summary isn't going to be the same for everybody.
Right. And this is an example of a one-page overview type of idea. There's another hand. Laura?
Hi, Laura Holmes, Settle Cooperative. Sort of along the same line, I hope I'm not repeating these, but I think more than one pager. More than one pager.
Right.
So either aimed at stakeholders or for each section, what are the key things in this section, so if you want to read more about it, teasers.
Should we call those onesies?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. Any other? Okay.
We've raised before the importance of contracting and using that as a way to deal with wages and so on in the industry. Just wondering if there's anything in here reflecting that. But the consulting team had suggested something like a two-stage IFB process, and I don't know if that's something you've discussed with the city or will be addressed at all.
Okay. So far, that's showing up under encourage measures to improve the safety, health, and jobs of workers.
Yeah, Alex, so that is two places where that's addressed. One is in the guiding principles, which is where that language comes from, and then the other is part of the evaluation program. It's there, and then Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
Okay. Anything else? Good suggestion, Carl. Got some great feedback there. So key themes are the three clean streams: recycling, compost, and trash. Typically blue for recycling, green for organics and compostables, and black, gray, or brown for trash. We're calling them initially, let us know if this is, we like the phrase, smart carts and smart rates. The smart carts is, what we're stressing is this helps reduce worker injuries by going from everyone lifting repetitively bags to going to a more efficient collection system with carts. We've heard that Seattle and San Francisco are models. This is a type of program Seattle and San Francisco have, and it works in this situation. They also can be tagged with RFID and other things like your current carts are, and set into tracking systems that a lot of which are just starting to evolve, apps that could be helpful in the outreach and education to target where we're getting the most pickups of the recyclables and the compostables, and where we need to target different messages for that. Looking at education and incentives first, improving efficiency, particularly the big buildings and residential was an example of that. Phasing in services universally, enforcing fairly, creating and retaining jobs, and getting better data for dentists.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I missed it. Can you just explain the rates part? I understood the carts part.
Correct. Next slide is why I went over that. Alex?
It looks like we're sticking with single stream to call it yet. Given the concern in China about contamination, is there any talk about source separation?
Regarding single stream, there was a webinar that I helped organize recently with EcoCycle in Boulder and Eureka Recycling in Minnesota, both of which are doing single stream programs, 10% residue. In Boulder, they're selling at about $90 to $100 a ton in today's marketplace in the Rockies, with no mixed paper being sold at all. They're putting the paper through enough times until they get it all sorted by grade to sell it at higher rates. So the idea that single stream is the problem is not necessarily so. What cities don't realize, they're in charge of setting the standards by which their processors operate. Markets first, the cities have to produce things that the markets will take, but the processors also need to be given guidance that we won't accept anything more than 10% residue rate. Then they'll have to put in more laborers, more equipment, run the lines slower, do other things to accommodate that particular contract requirement. So it's not necessarily single stream that's a problem. We haven't done single versus dual stream a lot in this report, but that's some of the context. If the Zero Waste Advisory Committee would like us to address that, that's a great example of an issue that would come out of today and would be good to hear feedback on. If you want to question single stream and consider alternatives to that.
And the Chinese standard is 1/2 of 1%, right? So for contamination. So I'm just wondering if this is in Colorado, if not discussed, but is likely to continue. And just thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm saying they're meeting market conditions. In Minnesota, the Eureka, they have a paper mill nearby, so they're selling to the nearby paper mill. So they haven't been affected a lot by China. But what I was highlighting is those are two nonprofit organizations that are doing the right things as zero waste entities, have been doing the right things for the right reasons, with treating their laborers well, and getting high prices for quality materials because they're focused on the highest and best use. So it's a great example of what can be done, but it's the cities that set the standards by which their processors will comply.
And that's something we recommend in the economic development strategy. The city could use its contract, could put language in the contract that would get higher quality materials and higher quality materials.
So, Tolly Graham from Zero Waste Boston Coalition, just in terms of improving efficiencies and creating and maintaining jobs, I think it would be really helpful to have some information for the city about like a big building. Would they create a job to help the whole building implement this zero waste strategy? Likewise, we've got the Boston Public Schools, we have housing, we have departments that are really going to need to define what those duties are, and I think it would be really helpful to promote that, to have some examples.
A great idea. One of the things that we did include in the plan so far is that big buildings, in order to continue to get service from the city-arranged services, would have to meet diversion and efficiency standards. That could be one of the standards that could be included as part of that, whether that is a full-time staff or something else. It could be a ambassador program like Boston used to have, or something of that nature. But Kirsten. You'll get the last.
Kirsten Petschel, I hear what you're saying about Eureka and EcoCycle, and I know that they've done a great job doing that. Two things. One, I know that they've worked with the cities around them to make sure that certain materials are banned because they can't be recycled, and I think that's something that the city of Boston has started doing with bags, so we have to continue in that vein and probably statewide, not only with bags, but number 7 plastics. I think that Alex from Eureka told me that black plastics are now not available in Minneapolis because they're not truly recyclable. So that's another piece of it. And then also, is there a way, or you probably already built this in, but in case you haven't, if single stream is not working and it's not something that can be made, we can't slow down enough, or it can't be done properly at whatever facility we end up using, Charlestown or whatever, this should be revisited in a couple of years. You know, if we have to increase the bottle bill, for instance, which makes a lot of sense, or dual stream, or a lot of other ways to make this, you know, why put it all together and then separate it all? We gotta pay for that. So.
Right.
Matt Church is on the Mandate Recycling. Two actually designers. A lot of them actually was originally built. I kind of wanted to talk about this eco-cycle. I mean, I like when you talk about how they are making sellable paper, sellable products. But take it with like a little bit of a caveat, because you said you reprocess a bunch of times, but every time you reprocess, there's a fixed cost per ton. So you can keep going, but at some point either the taxpayers pay or something else. But also glass. So in Colorado, they have all the beer makers, the glass bottle makers. So 20% of the weight is glass, and they're working for that. Meanwhile, Boston, New England, you just have RDOT. You just lost your only output or off market. So they have positive revenue for glass, and you're at basically landfill. So they're doing good things, but yeah, it's still, you have to look at the market region stuff, conditions. I mean, one thing that could be easily looked at for a single stream, I mean, at the end of the day, it's what you said, markets in mind first. One thing you can look at here is basically single stream with maybe a glass separate, or increase the bottle bill on the glass, because I know St. Louis is doing something like that now. What? Kansas City. Or Kansas City, not St. Louis. And Ripple Glass. Yeah, Ripple Momentum out in Colorado. But I don't know how well that's working either. It's working well. Yeah, so some may be here because here glass has been working.
Yeah, but you don't drink beer much in Boston.
Okay, so moving right along.
Hi, Don Burke from Mass DP. I just wanted to show support for looking at if you have to dual stream anything else, like maybe public-private partnerships, like taking some of the paper out. You remember the use of paper was so valuable that Abitibi would collect it for free. I mean, is this an opportunity to start, again, if you're kind of pausing to say, let's fix the problems? It might be a small, niche thing, but your theme here was to look at how recycling, how the zero waste process can increase local recycling, and that could be like one of the local niche areas if we have to go dual stream at all.
Great suggestion. 22% is residential, 78% is commercial. Residential is about to be designed by November, so we may not be able to pull off a major change in the residential system, but in the commercial, we have articulated the need, particularly the organics, to not go with one single black box solution. So it may be similar for recycling in the commercial sector, having multiple approaches be identified, particularly useful there to pioneer, and if they're successful, then to include those in the residential IFB next time. Eve?
I think that would be great, because one of the biggest things we hear from the commercial sector is single stream recycling doesn't work. So I definitely would, having pilots or having demonstrations about something else, they just find it's not as efficient as it used to be.
Great feedback. Amy's saying I'm way behind. So this slide was just describing save money, reduce trash, smart rates. We actually talked about this last time. This is a slide from our last presentation, highlighting in Waterville, Maine, they had a 54% decline once they implemented the rates in 2014. Worcester's had it for over 21 years and got a 55% decline. What we're saying in the proposal is that there be a base that's covered by the property taxes as currently is done, but that rates charged by the size of the container, the size of the carts in residential, would be funded through smart rates. So you pay more for a larger container than for a smaller container. And the smart rates would provide an incentive for people to not create as much trash and put all the materials that they can in the recycling and compost bins. By having it phased in with a base in the property taxes and some of the costs covered by the smart rates, it provides a less dramatic changeover for the city. That would be great for get input from you. Is a less dramatic change appropriate, or should we do what Ruth calls formally the Band-Aid approach, rip the Band-Aid off quickly, just do it right from day one? So we'd love to get your feedback on that in the breakouts. And then, so the plan now, the part of it is the services, rules, outreach, and education, with efficiency being key. These are the same 19 services, rules, and outreach and education options that we described last time for you, and they're in the handout. In the handout, we also have the waste diversion impact, tons per year, the total new costs, the diversion rate increase, and the climate gas is reduced for each of the options are listed. So that's what's new this time. These are basically the same initiatives with some of your enhanced language in the appendix. And this summary highlights the impacts which Ruth is about to go over.
So now I'm going to explain the background behind the analysis. And, just to give you some context for this, we kind of established that this is our big pie, right? This is Boston residents, businesses, and visitors dispose of approximately 840,000 tons per year. That's based on some really good information about what the city controls in terms of, our residential system, but most of it is kind of an unknown based on statewide averages and some other estimates that we did. We don't really know a lot about what goes on in the commercial sector and in the construction and demolition sector. But we think it's pretty big. This is about what we know about, the 22%, which is the residential sector. And of that, 78% is the commercial sector, of course, which we don't know much about. We know a little bit more about what the city directly controls, which is the city government. We're one of the largest generators in the city, of course, because of all the buildings and departments and things that go on in the city, but the schools, et cetera. But that's only about 1% of the total, again, based on kind of estimates, tons per employee per year. So this is kind of our pie. We know a lot about this one, pretty much. We know relatively, we can get that information pretty easily. This we don't know much about. But we still need to go forward to make decisions, because if we're going to become a zero-waste city, we need to understand that better and support our businesses and institutions in doing a better job of getting recycling and composting happening. Leadership takes leadership. These mayors are all leaders in zero waste. Los Angeles, San Francisco, Boston, taking the initiative to say, yes, we want to do zero waste, yes, we want to move forward in this, but you need that top-down, bottom-up approach in order to get to self-identified as a zero-waste city. And it has a multiplier effect. We're a zero-waste city. Oh, did you know we're a zero city? Okay, why did you get that straw when you went to the restaurant? Whatever, straws on request, just say no, whatever. Anything that you might want to do, when you transform that, you start thinking about everything in terms of that context. We're a sustainable city, we have these greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals, and we also have the goal of zero waste. That's our self-identified future. That's what leadership does. And fundamentally, on the commercial side, zero waste does save money. In the short term, it may look like a big new thing, lots of new things that trucks we have to buy, and parts we have to buy. But actually, on a business level, on a business by business level, we can save money by reducing the amount of waste we generate in the first place, and then recycling or composting it appropriately. It's not free, recycling is not free anymore, composting is expensive, but we can make a difference in terms of, which look at that bottom line and right sizing our containers at the commercial level. We have a lot of control over our Let me give you an example of how we estimate the diversion potential of the 19 initiatives evaluating for the city. And essentially did that by looking at the waste characterization studies that the state does at the disposal facilities, coming up with, we talked about that last time, all materials, percentages, and then understanding for cost what portion of those tons are made up of those different kinds of commodities. And so, for example, we estimated that there are 9,700 tons of cardboard disposed by residential customers in Boston. And how do we get that number? It's based on, what containers, what materials we collect in the trash, and then the composition study that the state does to understand what portion of that's cardboard. And then we say, well, what if we made it mandatory? Okay, we're going to mandate that everybody recycle that cardboard. But we know that not everybody will recycle cardboard. It's a mandate, right? So we still have to estimate. Everybody has to do it. Everybody has to hold their seatbelt. Everybody has to, go the speed limit. We're not all about our seatbelts or going the speed limit. But most of us are, a good percentage are. We took a very conservative approach and said, if we made it mandatory, that cardboard, and we enforced that ban, the statewide ban, and we enforced it in Boston, made it mandatory locally, we estimated we could capture 25% of the cardboard. Conservative number. If it's mandatory, we're going to capture 25% of that cardboard that's currently going in the trash. And the result would be 2,400 more tons of cardboard going to the recycling rather than into the trash. So that's the approach. It's a capture rate analysis. It's basically saying, if we implement this initiative, if we do this project, what portion of those materials that are currently going to be thrown away could actually be diverted from disposal and go into recycling or to be reduced. So that's how we did it. So then here are the results. I'll get out of the way you guys can see. Here are the results. We do have some pretty robust initiatives, residential and commercial organics diversion. We probably do that. This is a big portion of what's on the trash. Organics. Waste reduction and recycling requirements. That's the mandatory ordinance. That also would be a lot. Commercial hauler and generator requirements. Doing more with our commercial sector by saying you guys got to do more. And then, some changes to the residential collection system. The reason that's a relatively small number citywide is because the portion of residential trash is small compared to that huge number. This is a huge number. This is about 15% of the residential sector, but it only shows up as a small percentage of the citywide because residential is such a small part of citywide generation. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. And then we got all these other initiatives that by themselves, they look pretty small. However, the context is that they all feed into each other and they all make a big difference. You can't really have a robust residential commercial organics diversion program if you don't have a very robust community, outreach and technical assistance program. These go together. Also, the city leads by example. The city, as I showed you, is not a big generator. It's one of the bigger generators, 1% of the total. But it's not huge. It's not going to make the dial. But the city actually leading and becoming zero waste in all of our departments, that would tip the dial and help others and influence others. So while it has a small relative effect in terms of diversion tons, it has a bigger effect in terms of leadership. So that's kind of the estimated diversion potential by option. And then we were like, okay, how about cost? What's this going to cost us? And what do you guys think it should cost? Should it cost us $100 a year, $500 a year, $1,000 a year, $20 per month? It's reasonable. What's it going to cost? And then we use kind of generic nationwide estimates for costs, which are very variable across the country. We don't know what the costs are in Boston now, for example, in the commercial sector. We really don't know. But we could guesstimate, and so that's what we did. We kind of guesstimated. So the estimates that we used were based on additional city staff time, outreach, additional outreach that would be needed, either, additional support from, from contractors that already do that program through the state, or the city could hire staff to do more outreach. Facilities and equipment, we have in there, hey, we need more reuse stations. We might want to get a city-owned transfer station, material recovery facility. That's an estimate. And additional processing costs and additional collection costs. And then we gave ourselves a credit, because if tons are going to recycling and composting, and that has a cost associated with it, those tons are not going to trash. And so we gave ourselves a little bit of credit for that. We did not take credit for collection efficiency. We did not do anything about our base costs. We just left that the same. That we just made assumption that if the ton is not going to disposal and it's going to diversion, we're going to pay for diversion. We're going to pay less on the disposal side. So we gave ourselves a little bit of a credit. Those are our assumptions. And again, we did not take into account the city's current system-wide costs, which on the residential contract right now is about $40 million annually. That doesn't take into account a lot of the city staff costs and outreach and education that is currently done by the city. That's really just the contractor costs, the folks that provide the service. And it doesn't include any of the commercial, institutional, or commercial costs, because we don't really know what those are. But based on other communities of similar size and activity, could be anywhere from $100 million to $200 million a year. Maybe it's more. Do any of you guys think it's more? Anybody think it's less? Anybody have any idea? It's probably a lot though, right? It's a lot of material. It's a lot being hauled. It's not cheap to throw it away here in the Boston area, and it's not cheap to recycle it. So
More expensive than recycling or composting. Last I heard it was $125 a ton.
yeah, okay. And all right, so then we could take 125 a ton, multiply that by 800,000 tons, and that's a big number. Okay. All right, so here are our net new cost estimates. We estimated we need something like an additional 20 staff for the city of Boston. That's for the schools, that's for Renovate, that's in the Public Works Department, that's in the Environment Department, across the whole city family. If we really want to take zero waste city seriously, we probably need something on the order of 20 staff, give or take. And this is over the 12 years implementation time frame. We want to get to zero waste or darn close by 2030, 2040. We probably in that time frame need 20 more staff, something like that, right? Those additional staff costs were, kind of guesstimated. Other annual costs, outreach and education materials, processing costs. This would be like processing, we estimated $25 a ton for recyclables. Currently, we think maybe around $30 a ton. These flex up and down. Sometimes you get paid more, sometimes less. Right now, we just estimated $25 a ton we got to pay to get our stuff recycled, looking over the 12 years. And then collection costs. And we base that again on very national averages because, of course, the commercial sector, it's a lot more efficient to collect, a whole roll-off of trash rather than individual parts out on the street. And then the disposal cost reduction, that's just straight multiplication for the number of tons that aren't going to disposal anymore. We're giving ourselves credit for that. And so we came up with a net new annual cost of $15 million. $15 million annually just to get to zero waste, no problem, right? And then these guys have to sell that internally to the city family. So no problem, right? And then we calculated that to be about $5 a household or business. So taking all the households and all the businesses in the city and just dividing that evenly by everybody. And we know some people are going to pay more and some people are going to pay less because you're bigger and smaller, bigger buildings, smaller buildings, bigger businesses, smaller businesses. But if you just took the straight average, everybody pays $5 more a month. Starbucks latte, right? No problem. And then we kind of compared that addition. Susan?
Did you say $5 more a month or $5 a month?
These are all based on net new costs. So that's net new costs, net new estimated costs. Whatever you're paying now, plus $5. But you could also maybe be paying less. There are folks who, with new recycling and composting services, can reduce their trash and save money. So we don't know that. So this is just an average of the net new cost spread over everybody in the city. But if you take recycling, composting, and zeros really seriously, a big building or a big manufacturing company or you know, any of these organizations, you can save money. You really can. But if you didn't, you do whatever you're paying now plus $5. And so we compared this to other communities of kind of that we're interested in. You know, at our summit a couple of years ago, we heard from a couple of these cities, Austin, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. So we had good numbers from them. And so here is their costs, annual costs, and per capita costs. And this is very much an apples and oranges comparison, because as you can see, they're accounting for different things. Both Austin and Los Angeles have internal staff, internal city crews that do internal collection for residential. So, you know, that's difficult to compare. San Francisco, it's all contracted out to a third-party service provider. And so, but you can see the range, the annual cost, 40 million, 55, you know, if we added the proposed, that would be 55 million, 94 million, 450 million, and $178 million. No big deal, right? And then we divided that per capita. So the range, you know, from what we're paying, you know, maybe now for our current program, not taking into account the commercial sector, which we don't know too much about. San Francisco, all commercial sector, everybody's costs are in there. Austin and Los Angeles don't include much in the way of their commercial costs. So you can see that apples to oranges comparison. And then lastly, diversion to cost. So this is the diversion rate here in the blue bar. You know, that was the same diversion rate that you saw. It's just the little incremental additional that you would get from a new outreach and education program or a new mandatory requirement or something like that. So they're independent of each other in that they do add up to the total, but they we tried to take into account that, you know, we get a little extra credit if we do these extra things. Does that make sense? Okay, other questions? Great, Susan. I just want to add, in addition to the $15 million, in this handout, which has the explanation, what you're calculating is for the city of Boston to reach an 80% diversion rate by all these initiatives. And you know, those aren't city of Boston costs, right? That's not what taxpayers are going to pay or whatever, because a lot of that's commercial, where commercial is not part of the city system right now. So this is overall, big picture, all tons, divided up evenly between everybody in the city. So it's kind of a big picture. The point is to say, you know, what is it in the range of? You know, these are not going to be precise. You know, when you go out, when the city goes out to bid and gets new cost estimates, it's probably going to be very different from our cost estimates, sorry. We're just trying to give you a range, give you an understanding of relative impact of the initiatives and potential cost and diversion. That's what we're attempting to do.
My limited understanding of the Moore model is that when Boston uses it, it's only counting the emissions from incineration and disposal, and I know that other, like EPA, and you know, the emissions related to everything we produce and consume and dispose of is much higher. So that's why it has a huge upstream impacts, but it does. So, but in Boston's calculation, it only counts the waste as like 1% of the overall. Yeah. So I'm just wondering, you know, because the percentage that of the total Boston's emissions has an impact on how much resources the city's going to commit to the sector. So just wondering if that calculation is.
Yeah, so you know, in greenhouse gas emissions accounting is a whole other lecture, right? But in a nutshell, what we do is we use it, look at it geographically. You know, what are our emissions in the city of Boston, and what can we reduce over time? So we're really just looking very, very carefully what's emitted in the city of Boston, and that's why in that analysis, stuff going to incineration, stuff going to recycling is what's counted. Those big picture effects, those consumption-based greenhouse gas emissions, is a whole other analysis, and it's very worth doing and thinking about. It's just a different thing. Here's our geographic bound emissions, and then here are the emissions that we have worldwide. And a few meetings ago, we did present a slide that if you look at it from a consumption-based approach, our emissions are something like 40–45% based on our consumption, which if we're reducing consumption, if we're increasing diversion, could have a big effect on that. go into our breakouts, Amy.
Okay, so, back. Oh, okay, so we're gonna break out, Susan, the ICI group is going, is it room 900?
Yes.
Okay, so you're gonna go upstairs to room 900
With Carl.
with Carl. ICI residential is gonna stay here. We would like, when you go to your groups, we're gonna ask somebody to report back, because I know when we did the breakouts once before, people were really curious about what happened in each other's groups. So we'll come back here at 11:30, and we'll report back. But here's what we want you to be talking about. Are there any questions, comments, or feedback about the options, their cost, or their implementation? Who are the stakeholders we should be engaging? Are there people that we haven't talked to yet that are really going to be concerned about this? Either be really supportive or really not supportive that we should know about? And what are the kind of data or metrics that we should be collecting in order to track progress? As you'll sort of see through this process, we don't have great data, and going forward, we want to have better data so we can be tracking project progress. So what are the kinds of things we should be thinking about? And then, as I said, we'll come back to this room and report out, and we'll have about another 15 minutes. Susan?
Just say what ICI stands for.
Yes, industrial, commercial, institutional, or institutional, commercial, industrial.
And to get to room 900, for those of you who haven't been there before, go to the elevators, go to the 9th floor, just come out and turn to the left. And the room 900 is that big conference room right there, and I'll be up there.